r/AskReddit. Doctors, what is the worst homemade cure a patient used for their illness? I knew someone who got cancer and decided to starve it instead of taking chemo. First results after the 40-day fast were promising, but not for long. He died in less than a year. The sad part is, the survival rate with chemo for this type of cancer is really high, and it was detected quite early. Nurse here had the fortunate luck to be privy to a patient's super duper secret way of getting rid of leg cramps at night. Get a cork, not just any cork though, it must be from a bottle of red wine, and tuck it in between your toes at night. He was very sure that was the cure that Big Pharma wasn't telling us. Completely irrelevant that he started taking a magnesium supplement at the same time as his newfound super cure of toe cork fondling. So Big Pharma, if you're reading this, we all know now. Told patients to apply cream to their foot. They ignored my advice and just kept rubbing garlic over it. They later came back and I told them their foot is getting worse because they aren't using their cream and they now need to go to hospital. They ignored me and kept just rubbing garlic. Eventually they lost their foot. Dermatologist here. Dude was trying to get rid of his papulopustulosis acne with a homemade mask, which consisted of a mix of betamethasone ointment, honey, cream cheese, yogurt, banana, and makeup in cream for color. So many bad things here, and the dude developed a nodular cystic acne after 3 or so applications, which he did daily because of course. Who suggested this abomination? Various YouTube videos and his own initiative of mixing everything in a bowl to cure faster. I took my daughter to the doctor for a recurring ear infection when she was about 4. The doctor took one look in her ear and asked me if I had seen her putting any foreign objects into her ears, and I said no. He then took some tweezers and pulled out a small piece of what turned out to be garlic. I told him I had no idea how it got there. He said it was definitely making her ear infections worse. Turns out that her dad and stepmom had heard that garlic oil can help cure infections and they didn't have any. So instead of taking my daughter to the doctor like they should have, they literally just shoved a small clove of garlic in my daughter's ear and left it there. Paramedic once had a patient diagnosed with a cancerous growth on his ear. He took care of it himself with fingernail clippers. It got so infected by the time he called 911, we could see his jawbone through his cheek. Not a doctor, but a pharmacist who works in an ER. I had a woman come in for chest pain, and when I was interviewing her for her medication history, she was telling me how bad the pain was that she took everything in her medicine cabinet. I asked her to list what she has in her medicine cabinet, what she took. The list went: Tylenol, acetaminophen, 2 tablets, Advil, ibuprofen, 2 tablets, aspirin 2 tablets, heroin 1 2 points, Gravel. At which point I kind of had to go, hold up, you use how many points of what? And the patient very matter-of-factly stated that she came in because the heroin didn't help with the pain at all. Which in some ways I guess was a pretty reasonable course of action, since she came in since the heroin didn't work. My mom, a psychiatric nurse practitioner, has a patient who smokes meth because it's the only thing that helps them sleep. Pretty wacky considering Nazis in World War II used it to not sleep. Not a doctor, but my vet friend once had a client rub butter all over her cat in hopes that the cat would lick it off because the cat had stopped eating. There's a level of reasoning in this one that's totally out of whack with how ultimately silly it is. Nurse here. I used to work at a rural magnet hospital in the south. Had a patient who was there because he'd gotten athlete's foot and decided to use an old mountain remedy. Soak your feet in vinegar, lemon juice, and boiling water to kill the fungus. In fairness, the original remedy probably called for merely hot water, but the guy went a little overboard with the temperature. He gave himself some nice bilateral 3rd-degree burns on his feet, but there was no sign of any athlete's foot, so he had that going for him, which was nice. My aunt has this concoction of basically just rubbing alcohol and marijuana leaves, seeds and stems, and for whatever crazy reason she thinks that if you rub it over an ache that it will magically make it go away. LOL, she calls it the brujeria. Not a doctor. I'm an X-ray tech in a hospital. Had a patient with a breast infection. She attempted to treat it with Neosporin. When she finally came to the ER, there was just a huge gaping hole on her chest where the breast used to be. The smell in the room was overpowering to say the least. It turns out you can't cure breast cancer with Neosporin. I don't know if she survived or not. Doctor in the family told me an infant was brought into the ER incredibly ill, shaking, and vomiting from her daycare. She had a huge oral ulcer in her mouth that her mom tried to cure by killing the bacteria, but they were out of mouthwash, so she diluted vodka in apple juice. She had the "can I see the manager" haircut and threw a huge fit when CPS was called. Rural nurse here had a patient soak his finger in kerosene in order to make it grow back. I'm picturing the severed finger in a glass of kerosene on the kitchen windowsill, waiting for it to sprout roots like a plant cutting. Not a doctor, but the son of one. There was a guy who would go in once a year or so for checkups. He had surgery on his foot and needed it looked at regularly. My dad was the surgeon, so anyways, one day guy comes in for his apt, says he isn't feeling well, thinks he might have gotten the flu from his kids. No big deal, unrelated illness happens, right? Well, he was talking to my dad before he took his shoes off. He was beaming. Yeah, I fell pretty hard, gashed my foot open, but I fixed it myself. Saved a trip to the hospital. Well, lo and behold, he has taken copper wire and sutured the gash shut. It had been a week and it was badly infected. That's where his flu-like symptoms came from. Had he waited a few more days, it would have killed him. Dad took those out, dressed it. The skin had degraded too far to sew up properly, prescribed him antibiotics and referred him to the hospital for observation. He ended up spending $3,000 on his care instead of the $200 or so for stitches in the first place. Had a patient who couldn't sleep because she had gotten bug bites on her legs keeping her awake. Her cure? She poured boiling water on them. Gave herself third-degree burns to treat her bug bites. Okay, I use a warm spoon remedy to remove itching. Hold a spoon under the hot tap until the spoon is warm, not burning, and press on bite. It works, but it's not permanent. But this? Christ. I'm a paramedic and my partner told me the worst he has ever seen was for a burn patient. He said that he saw a teenager hobbling towards him covered in a bunch of white gooey gunk. So apparently homeboy was out in the country trying to start a big bonfire and he first decided to douse his big bundle with some gasoline before tossing a match in. Well, it caught real fast and he got a big ol' flash burn across his whole body. His momo apparently used to be a certified nurse and covered him in mayonnaise because that would help treat the burn. Yeah, nah. All she did was introduce a ducton of infection into his body and make it much more excruciating for him when my partner had to wipe it off of him and place burn bandages on him while they transported him to the hospital. This isn't from something I've seen clinically, but if you look it up, there's news articles about FB groups of parents who encourage each other to do horrible bleach enemas, or to make their kids swallow caustic chemicals, to cure autism. And then when the kids get agitated and shed their intestinal lining, they consider it a sign that it's working. But this is literal child abuse. Not a doctor. I work at a grocery store deli. One lady, who is a regular, is convinced that magnets cure body ailments. She has magnets in her car and occasionally she'll make a big show of being unable to breathe. She is fine. And don't call the ambulance. She will walk all the way outside to her car, bring the chintzy fridge magnets back inside to our back corner. Then by rubbing the magnets on her chest through all of layers of clothes, she is cured and doesn't need the paramedics or medical help. And don't get her started on how oranges and vitamins are the cure for autism. Really, don't. I will slap your hand so hard. My patient came in complaining that her skin turned blue after ruling out that she was a smurf. I asked her if she'd been using any alternative products. Turns out she had been ingesting colloidal silver with the belief that it would prevent infections. Not a doctor, but my job is to read medical records all day and I know a bad idea even I see one. This dude with type 2 diabetes had a gnarly open wound on his leg. He was trying to self-treat with essential oils. They didn't help and the wound was just getting worse. Finally, after 3 months of the wound getting longer and deeper, the guy showed up to urgent care smelling like a corpse. The doctor looked at his leg and could see bone. He sent the guy to the ER and his leg was amputated. Butter on a burn. Work in medical field. Yogurt up their vag for yeast infection. I'm a CNA working on becoming a nurse, but I work alongside them daily. Had a male that came into the hospital complaining about his backside. had a huge ulcer and was determined to be a complication from him being diabetic. He adamantly refused that he was diabetic and would not allow the hospital to treat him for diabetes because he was a truck driver and if he had to take insulin he would lose his license apparently. So he kept insisting that he just needed some, in his words, salve to put on this giant ulcer because he's done it before and it worked fine. So he said, the results came back from the ulcer and found he had MRSA, which was causing it to be even worse. He refused to believe the multiple doctors that tried to help him understand that he was diabetic, needed to treat that and needed to treat MRSA with a hardcore antibiotic regimen. He refused, checked himself out, asked me anything, then showed back up like 2 weeks later in an ambulance that a friend called for him because he went septic and was in a real bad way. Why do you go to the hospital just to refuse everything that doctors and nurses have seen for years? He was putting bacitracin on his decubitus ulcer with MRSA in it, until he basically couldn't move because he was drained of all energy. Ended up having a whole lot of his buttock removed. Not sure what happened to him after that. Had a patient that would make potions out of various household chemicals. She was schizophrenic but it ended up killing her. When I was younger, my piano teacher had me sleep with wine corks between my fingers to help with my tendinitis. My hands were always super sore when I woke up. My primary laughed when I told her about that. Not a doctor, but an old friend of mine. She caught the common cold, but instead of her mom taking her to the doctor, she gave her a mixture of deer blood and horse semen to drink. She threw it up, and only after she got much worse was she taken to the doctor. When she got out of the hospital, she told me that her mother was now in prison for child abuse and neglect. Romanian patient with a mild otitis. First he put garlic in his ear, then he poured some alcohol in it and in the end he put in a lit cigarette. I'm not a doctor, but when I was in the Peace Corps in Samoa, there was an outbreak of pink eye that shut down school. The local remedy was fresh breast milk and or use tea bags in the eyes. Not coming in cause they can't afford it. Taking snake venom. Motor oil injected into the knee for osteoarthritis. Not a doctor, but I heard about a man with plant psoriasis who used a steel wool pad to scrape off the patches. He said it worked pretty well. I'm sure it hurt like a beach, though. Not a doctor but just wanted to share something. My aunt used to squeeze the juices of a lemon directly into my nose whenever I used to get a nosebleed. She did it for years when I was a child. It did not work. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.